I booked her Airbnb to escape Seattle. 3 days later, she asked me to stay forever. Let me back up. My name is Owen Carver. I'm 31, a software developer for a mid-sized tech firm in Seattle, and I was coming apart at the seams. 6 months earlier, my girlfriend of 4 years, Allie, had walked out after telling me I was emotionally unavailable, which is rich, coming from someone who scheduled our date nights in Google Calendar and set reminders to kiss me goodnight. But maybe she was right. Maybe I'd stopped feeling anything real for a long time. Or maybe I'd never learned how in the first place. My parents divorced when I was 12. My dad remarried within a year. My mom threw herself into her career and barely noticed when I left for college. I learned early that people leave, and the trick is not to need them too much. Work wasn't helping. Deadlines stacked like dirty dishes. Performance reviews where my boss, a man named Greg who wore the same 3 polo shirts in rotation, asked if I was team material and culture aligned. I couldn't remember the last time I'd looked forward to anything. My apartment smelled like old takeout and the gym socks I kept meaning to wash. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning with my heart racing and no idea why. So when my friend Marcus suggested I get out of the city for a long weekend, I opened Airbnb at 2 in the morning and searched for remote cabin, Wi-Fi optional, no people. I found a cottage on Lopez Island, weathered cedar siding, a garden spilling into wild grass, and a host profile picture of a woman with dark eyes and a half smile that looked like she knew a secret. Her name was Claire. 5-star reviews. Quiet, restorative, exactly what I needed, one guest wrote. I booked it for 3 nights without reading the rest. The ferry ride from Anacortes was gray and cold, the kind of October morning where the sky and water blur into one. I sat on the upper deck with my jacket collar up, a lukewarm coffee going cold in my hand, watching the San Juan Islands drift past like ghosts. The wind smelled like salt and diesel and something older pine, maybe, or whetstone, or the beginning of winter. A kid in a bright yellow raincoat ran past, shrieking, and his mother called after him in a tired voice. An older couple stood at the railing, not talking, just watching the horizon. I thought about Allie's last text, the one I still hadn't deleted. I hope you figure out what you're looking for, Owen. I really do. I didn't have an answer. I didn't even know what the question was. What was I looking for? A reset button? Permission to feel something again? Or just a place where no one knew my name? Claire was waiting at the Lopez Island dock when the ferry pulled in. I recognized her from the photo, though in person she looked different, sharper, more present, more real. She wore faded jeans and a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled to her elbows, work boots caked with dried mud, and her dark hair was pulled into a loose bun that kept coming undone in the wind. She had fine lines around her eyes and a few streaks of silver at her temples. She looked like someone who'd spent a lot of time outside, working with her hands. When I walked down the ramp with my duffel bag, she stepped forward and extended a hand. Owen? That's me. Her handshake was firm, her palm warm and slightly rough, like she'd been pulling weeds or carrying firewood. Up close, she smelled faintly like rosemary and soil. She smiled a brief, genuine smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes and gestured toward a dusty blue pickup truck in the parking lot. Welcome to Lopez. You need anything before we head out? Coffee? Bathroom? I'm good, thanks. All right, hop in. The truck's interior smelled like old leather and cedar chips. A half-empty water bottle rolled around near my feet. The radio was tuned to NPR, the volume low. Claire drove with one hand on the wheel, relaxed, like she'd made this trip 1,000 times. We wound through farmland, open fields dotted with sheep, old barns leaning into the wind, split-rail fences overgrown with blackberry vines. She didn't talk much, just pointed out a few landmarks as we passed them. That's the library. Open Tuesdays and Thursdays. Good selection if you like mysteries. I'll keep that in mind. General stores up ahead. Best sandwiches on the island, if you get hungry. Noted. And that's the lavender farm. Smells incredible in July. Even now you can still catch a little of it if the wind's right. I rolled down the window. She was right, there was a faint sweetness in the air, layered under the smell of wet earth and fallen leaves. It was the kind of smell that made you want to stop and breathe deeply, like maybe the world wasn't as heavy as you thought. When we pulled into the driveway, I saw the cottage first, exactly like the photos, only better. The cedar siding had weathered to a soft gray, and ivy climbed one corner. A stone path led to the front door, flanked by lavender bushes and rosemary that brushed my jeans as I walked past. Behind the cottage, maybe 50 yards away, was the main house. Bigger, older, with a wraparound porch and a brick chimney trailing a thin line of smoke. Claire killed the engine and turned to me. So, cottage is all yours. I stocked the fridge with basics, eggs, bread, butter, some local cheese. There's firewood on the porch, and the stove is temperamental, but it works if you're patient with it. Wi-Fi passwords on the counter. She handed me a key tied to a piece of driftwood worn smooth by the sea. If you need anything, I'm in the main house. Just text. And if you want to stay longer, there's no rush. Next guest isn't booked until late November. Stay longer. The words hung in the air between us, casual but weighted, like an invitation she wasn't sure she should have made. I'll keep that in mind, I said. She nodded, then hesitated, like she wanted to say something else. But she just smiled again, that same brief, almost shy smile, and climbed back into the truck. I watched her drive the short distance to the main house, park, and disappear inside. Then I unlocked the cottage and stepped into my temporary life. Inside, the cottage was small and perfect. One room, really, with a wood stove in the corner, a bed tucked under a skylight, and bookshelves stuffed with dog-eared paperbacks, mystery novels, poetry collections, a field guide to Pacific Northwest birds. The kitchen was barely a kitchen, just a two-burner stove and a sink with a window overlooking Claire's garden. I could see rows of kale and winter squash, a trellis heavy with the last of the tomatoes, a scarecrow wearing a faded mariner's cap. The whole place smelled like pine and old books and the faintest trace of whoever had stayed here before me. I unpacked, threw my duffel on the bed, plugged in my laptop, made coffee in the French press on the counter, and then I sat by the window and watched the light change. The sky went from gray to silver to a pale, watery gold as the sun dipped toward the tree line. For the first time in months, I felt something close to calm. Not happiness? Exactly. Just the absence of noise. I didn't see Claire again until the next morning. I'd gone out to the garden at dawn to take a photo of the sunrise. The sky was streaked with pink and orange, the kind of light that makes you want to believe in something, and there she was, kneeling in the dirt with a basket of carrots beside her. She wore the same flannel shirt, her hands covered in soil, her hair falling out of its bun again. She looked up when she heard my footsteps on the gravel. Morning. Coffee? I just had some. Thanks. She wiped her hands on her jeans and stood, brushing dirt from her knees. You're up early. Habit. I usually run before work. Couldn't sleep past 6 even if I wanted to. There's a trail behind the house if you want to stretch your legs. Loops around to the bluff, then back through the woods. Takes about 40 minutes. Beautiful views. I might do that. She picked up the basket and paused, glancing at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Curiosity? Maybe? Or something softer. You? Settling in? Okay? Yeah, it's quiet. Too quiet? I shook my head. No, it's good. It's exactly what I needed. She studied me for a second, like she was deciding whether to believe me. Then she nodded slowly, as if weighing something internal. If you're around later, I'm making dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta and whatever's left in the garden. But you're welcome to join if you're hungry. This is a bad idea, I thought. You came here to be alone, to figure your shit out, not to get tangled up with your Airbnb host. Sure, I said. 7? I'll be there. Dinner was linguine with roasted vegetables, eggplant, zucchini, cherry tomatoes, and a bottle of red wine she'd opened but barely touched. We ate at her kitchen table, which was cluttered with seed catalogs, a laptop half buried under unopened mail, a stack of books on landscape design. The house smelled like garlic and rosemary and wood smoke from the fireplace in the next room. It was warm in a way my apartment never was lived in, comfortable, like a place someone actually cared about. She asked about Seattle, and I told her about the job, the performance reviews, the apartment I could barely afford in Capitol Hill, the breakup that still felt unfinished, like a sentence cut off mid-thought. What happened? She asked, refilling her wine glass. We wanted different things, I guess. She wanted me to be more present, emotionally available. I didn't know how. Did you love her? I thought about it. I don't know. I thought I did. But maybe I just loved the idea of not being alone. She nodded, like that made perfect sense. That's honest. What about you? I asked. How long have you lived here? 22 years. I moved here with my ex-husband when I was 23. We ran a landscaping business together, designed gardens, installed irrigation systems, that kind of thing. It was good for a while. What happened? She set down her fork and stared at her plate. We grew apart. Or maybe we were never really together in the first place. It's hard to say. We got married young, too young, probably. I thought that's what you were supposed to do. Get married, build a life, have kids, check the boxes. Someone he met at a trade show. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was a long time coming. She took a sip of wine. We have a son, Tyler. He's 28, works in finance in New York. Very busy, very successful, very intense. Does he visit? Not often. Maybe once a year, if I'm lucky. He was angry when we split. Blamed me, mostly. Said I gave up too easily. She laughed, but it sounded hollow. He doesn't understand that sometimes staying is harder than leaving. That must be tough. It is what it is. She looked at me, and for a moment I saw something raw in her expression. Loneliness. Maybe. Or regret. What about you? Family? My parents are in Portland, divorced when I was 12. I see them a couple times a year, usually around the holidays. No siblings. Lonely. Yeah. We sat in silence for a moment, the kind that doesn't need filling. The fire crackled in the next room. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Then she said, I should let you get back. You probably want to relax, unwind. I didn't mean to talk your ear off. I'm not in a hurry. She looked at me, really looked at me, and something shifted in the air between us. Her expression softened, her gaze lingering a beat too long. And for a second I thought she might say something that would change the shape of the evening, but she didn't. She just stood and started clearing the plates, her movements brisk and efficient, like she was putting distance between us on purpose. Thanks for dinner, I said, standing to help. Anytime. I helped her wash up, she washed. I dried, and when we were done, she walked me to the door. The night was cold and clear, the stars thick overhead, the Milky Way a pale smear across the sky. She leaned against the doorframe with her arms crossed, her breath fogging in the cold air. Owen? I turned. I meant it. You can stay as long as you want. The cottage is yours. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. But as I walked back down the stone path, my hands shoved deep in my pockets, I felt something shift inside me, something I couldn't name but couldn't ignore. The next 3 days blurred together in the best possible way. I worked a little, answered emails, fixed a bug in a project I was supposed to have finished weeks ago, attended a Zoom meeting where Greg asked if I was finding balance and I lied and said yes. But mostly I walked, read, and sat by the fire. The island was quiet in a way that felt intentional, like it was giving me space to think, or maybe just space to stop thinking. I ran the trail Claire had mentioned, a narrow path that wound through Douglas fir and cedar, past a creek swollen with rainwater, and emerged on a bluff overlooking the sound. The water was gray-green and restless, and I stood there for a long time, watching the waves and feeling something loosen in my chest. Claire and I fell into an easy rhythm. She'd knock on the cottage door in the mornings with fresh eggs or a thermos of coffee, and we'd talk for a few minutes, small talk, mostly, but comfortable. She'd tell me about her day, planting garlic, repairing a fence, meeting with a client about a garden redesign, and I'd tell her about mine, which was mostly nothing, and she'd laugh and say that sounded perfect. In the evenings, I'd find excuses to stop by the main house. She never turned me away. We'd sit on her porch with mugs of tea or glasses of wine, wrapped in blankets, watching the sun set over the trees. We talked about everything and nothing: books, travel, the strange quiet of island life. She told me about the lavender farm she'd worked at one summer, the year she'd spent in Italy after college, the garden she was planning for spring. I told her about the trip to Japan I'd always wanted to take, the novel I'd started writing in my 20s and abandoned, the way Seattle had started to feel like a trap. You could leave, she said one night. And go where? She shrugged. Anywhere. You're a software developer. You can work from anywhere. It's not that simple. Why not? I didn't have a good answer. On the fourth night it rained. Not the drizzle Seattle is famous for, but a hard, drumming rain that turned the driveway into a river and made the trees bow and sway. I was reading by the stove one of the mysteries from the shelf. Something about a detective in Norway when I heard a knock. Claire stood in the doorway, soaked through, holding a flashlight, her hair plastered to her face. Power's out at the house, she said, breathless. Mind if I waited out here? Of course. Come in. She stepped inside, shaking water from her hair like a dog, and I handed her a towel. She dried off while I stoked the fire, adding another log. And then she sat on the floor with her back against the couch, her knees drawn up, still shivering slightly. I poured her a glass of whiskey from the bottle I'd brought Jameson, nothing fancy, and sat down beside her. The firelight made shadows dance on the walls, and outside, the rain hammered the roof like it was trying to get in. This happens a lot? I asked. Once or twice a month in the fall. Big storms roll in off the Pacific. Usually the power's back in an hour or so. Do you have candles at the house? Probably. I forgot to grab them. She sipped the whiskey and closed her eyes. God, that's good. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the rain. Then she said, quietly, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. Why'd you really come here?" I thought about it, turning the question over in my mind. I don't know. I needed to be somewhere that wasn't Seattle. Somewhere I could think. Running away? Maybe. Or running towards something. I haven't figured out which yet. She nodded, staring into the fire. I did that once. Ran all the way to an island in the middle of nowhere, told myself it was a fresh start. It didn't solve anything, but it helped. Gave me room to breathe, to figure out who I was without someone else's expectations hanging over me. What were you running from? Myself, mostly. The person I thought I had to be. The good wife, the supportive partner, the woman who doesn't ask for too much. She laughed bitterly. Turns out I was asking for the wrong things the whole time. And now I'm still figuring it out, but at least I'm not pretending anymore. She turned to look at me, and I realized how close we were sitting. Her shoulder was touching mine. I could smell her shampoo, something herbal, lavender maybe, mixed with wood smoke, and see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. My heartbeat kicked up, loud in my ears. "Owen," she said quietly, her voice barely audible over the rain. "Yeah? This is a bad idea." "What is?" She didn't answer. She just leaned in, slowly, giving me time to pull away. I didn't. Her lips brushed mine, tentative and soft, and then she kissed me for real. A deep, searching kiss that tasted like whiskey and rain, and something I couldn't name. My hand found the back of her neck, my fingers tangling in her damp hair, and she made a small sound in her throat that sent heat flooding through me. Her hand came up to my chest, fingers curling into my shirt, pulling me closer. We pulled apart after what felt like forever, breathing hard, our foreheads resting together. She looked at me, her eyes wide and dark. "I shouldn't have done that," she said. "Why not?" "Because you're my guest. Because you're—" She stopped, biting her lip. "Younger? Does that matter?" She stood abruptly, wrapping her arms around herself, putting distance between us. "It should. But does it?" She didn't answer. She grabbed her flashlight from the floor and opened the door. The rain had slowed to a steady drizzle, the worst of the storm already past. "I need to go," she said, her voice tight. "Claire, good night, Owen." She was gone before I could say anything else, disappearing into the rain, the beam of her flashlight bouncing as she ran back to the main house. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the bed staring at the skylight, watching the clouds race across the moon, replaying the kiss in my head over and over. The way she'd hesitated before pulling away. The look in her eyes, not regret? Exactly. But fear. Fear of what? I didn't know. The age gap? What people might think. Tyler? Or maybe just fear of wanting something she'd convinced herself she didn't deserve. I kept reaching for my phone, thinking I'd text her. "Are you okay? Can we talk?" But I didn't know what to say. So I just lay there, watching the sky lighten from black to gray, and wondered what the hell I was doing. The next morning, I went to the main house. Claire was in the garden again, pulling weeds with fierce, almost angry concentration, her movements sharp and deliberate. She didn't look up when I approached, even though I knew she'd heard me. "Can we talk?" I said. "There's nothing to talk about." "Claire, you're leaving tomorrow, right? Let's just leave it at that." "What if I don't want to leave?" She finally looked at me, her hands still buried in the dirt. "Owen, you don't know what you're saying." "Yes, I do. You're 31. I'm 45. You live in Seattle. I live here. You have a whole life ahead of you, career, relationships, everything, and I—" She stopped, shaking her head, her jaw tight. "This doesn't work." "Why not?" "Because it doesn't. Trust me. I've lived long enough to know." I crouched down beside her, close enough to smell the earth on her hands. What are you really afraid of? Her hands stilled. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Then, quietly, my son, Tyler? She nodded, her eyes fixed on the ground. He doesn't handle change well. When his father and I split, he didn't talk to me for 6 months, blamed me for everything, said I broke up the family, that I was selfish, that I only thought about myself. Her voice cracked. If he finds out I'm 7, she gestured helplessly between us. He'll think I'm being reckless, or worse. Worse how? Embarrassing. Pathetic. Dating someone closer to his age than mine? He'll say, I'm having a midlife crisis, that I'm making a fool of myself. She pulled her hands from the dirt and wiped them on her jeans, but they were shaking. He's all I have left, Owen. If he shuts me out again, I don't know if I can. I reached out and took her hand. It was cold and covered in dirt, and she flinched but didn't pull away. So, what do we do? I asked. She looked at me, and I saw the conflict written all over her face, want and fear and exhaustion all tangled together. She wanted this. Wanted me. But she was terrified of the cost. I don't know, she whispered. I extended my reservation. 1 more week, then another. Marcus called and asked if I was ever coming back. Man, are you okay? You sound different. I told him I was fine. Just needed more time. My boss sent a passive-aggressive email about remote work expectations and team cohesion. I ignored it. Claire and I didn't talk about the kiss, but it was there between us, a live wire we kept almost touching. She'd brush my hand, passing me a coffee cup, and I'd feel a jolt. I'd catch her watching me from the garden, and she'd look away quickly, color rising in her cheeks. We circled each other like dancers learning a new routine, testing the boundaries, afraid to step too close. One afternoon, I was fixing a loose board on the cottage porch. She'd mentioned it was wobbly, and I'd found tools in the shed, and she came over with a jar of iced tea. She sat on the steps, watching me work. You don't have to do that, she said. I know, but I wanted to. I set down the hammer. Because you've been kind to me, and I wanted to do something for you. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I'm glad you stayed. I looked at her. Me too. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about her words. I'm glad you stayed. It was such a simple thing to say, but it felt like permission to want this, to let myself feel something real for the first time in years. I texted her at midnight. Are you awake? Her reply came immediately. Yes. Can I come over? I walked to the main house in the dark, my breath fogging in the cold November air. She was waiting on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, and when I reached her, she stood and kissed me. No hesitation this time, just certainty. We went inside, and she poured 2 glasses of wine, and we sat on the couch by the fire, not talking, just being. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and I wrapped my arm around her, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. I'm scared, she said after a while. Me too. What if this ruins everything? What if it doesn't? She tilted her head up to look at me. You're an optimist. Not usually, but with you, I want to be. She kissed me again, slower this time, and when she pulled back, her eyes were wet. I don't know how to do this, Owen. I don't know how to let someone in again. Neither do I. But we can figure it out together. Can we? Yeah. I think so. 2 weeks later, Tyler called. Claire had her phone on speaker while she was cooking dinner. Roasted chicken, potatoes, the kitchen warm and fragrant, and I was sitting at the table pretending to read email. The moment she saw his name on the screen, her whole body went tense. Mom, I need to ask you something. Sure, honey. What's up? Is there someone staying at the cottage? Claire's face went pale. She glanced at me, panicked. Yes, a guest. Why do you ask? I saw a charge on your PayPal. Looked like a refund? She'd refunded half my booking fee after the 2nd week, insisting I was staying too long at full price. I'd argued, but she'd refused to listen. He extended his stay, she said carefully, her voice measured. I gave him a discount for the longer reservation. It's off-season. Not much demand. Huh. Okay. A pause, heavy and loaded. Is everything all right there? Everything's fine. Why wouldn't it be? You sound different. I don't know. Just different. I'm cooking dinner, Tyler. Can I call you back later? Yeah, sure. Love you, Mom. Love you too. She hung up and set the phone down, her hands shaking so badly she had to grip the counter to steady herself. He knows, she said, her voice barely a whisper. He doesn't know. He's guessing. He's always guessing. That's how he operates. He digs until he finds something, and then he uses it against me. I stood and walked over to her, putting my hand on her shoulder. Claire, you can't live like this. Like what? Afraid of your own son? Her eyes flashed with something anger, hurt, defiance. You don't understand. Then help me understand. She turned away, gripping the counter so hard her knuckles went white. He's all I have left, Owen. My marriage ended. My business barely survived the divorce. Tyler is the only family I have that still speaks to me. If he shuts me out again, if he decides I'm not worth his time, her voice cracked, and she pressed a hand to her mouth, fighting for control. I can't lose him. I put my hand on her shoulder. She didn't pull away. After a moment, she turned and leaned into me, her forehead resting against my chest. I wrapped my arms around her, and we stood there in the kitchen, the chicken burning slightly in the oven, neither of us moving. That night, we finally talked. Really talked. We sat on her couch until 2 in the morning, the fire burning low, and she told me everything. About her marriage, how it had been good at first, full of plans and dreams, then slowly hollow, then nothing at all except shared bills and polite silence. About the business she'd built from scratch, the clients she'd loved, and how Marcus had taken half of it in the divorce, leaving her scrambling to survive. About Tyler, who'd inherited his father's rigidity and her fear of failure, who'd called her selfish when she'd finally asked for a divorce, who'd refused to come home for Christmas that first year. She cried, and I held her, and when she finally looked up at me, her eyes were red but clear. I don't know how to do this, she said. I don't know how to let you in without ruining everything. Neither do I. But I want to try. Do you? Really? Yeah, I really do. She kissed me then, and this time neither of us pulled away. We stayed up until dawn, talking and touching and learning each other, and when the sun rose over the trees, painting the sky pink and gold, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. We lasted 3 more weeks before Tyler came to the island. He didn't call ahead, just showed up one Saturday morning in a rental car, his suit jacket slung over one arm, his face hard and furious. I was in the cottage, halfway through a work call, when I heard him shouting, "Are you serious, Mom? Him?" I hung up mid-sentence and ran to the main house. Tyler was standing in the driveway, pointing at me like I was evidence in a trial. He was tall and sharp-featured, his mother's eyes in a face that had never learned how to soften, his jaw clenched tight. Tyler, Claire began, stepping between us. How old is he? 30? 35? Jesus. Mom. 31, I said, keeping my voice even. He turned on me, his eyes blazing. And you think this is a good idea? Dating someone my mother's age? Tyler, that's enough, Claire said, her voice firm but trembling. No, it's not enough. Do you have any idea how this looks? My mother? Dating someone who could be her son? He's 3 years older than you, Claire said evenly. And he's not your concern. Not my concern? You're my mother. And I'm also a person, Claire shot back, her voice rising. A person who gets to make her own choices. This is insane. You're having a midlife crisis. Maybe I am. Or maybe I'm finally doing something for myself instead of living for everyone else's approval. Tyler's face twisted. So this is about Dad? About getting back at him? This has nothing to do with your father. Then what is it about? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're trying to prove something, and it's embarrassing. I stepped forward. Maybe we should all sit down and… I'm not sitting down with you, Tyler snapped, his voice ice cold. Mom, can we talk? Alone? Claire looked at me, her expression desperate, and I nodded. She followed Tyler into the house, and I stood in the driveway, my pulse hammering, my fists clenched at my sides. I heard their voices rise and fall, Tyler's sharp and accusing, Claire's low and steady, both of them hurt and angry and talking past each other. After 20 minutes, the door opened. Tyler walked out without looking at me, got in his car, and drove away, gravel spraying from his tires. Claire came to the cottage an hour later. Her eyes were swollen, her face pale. He said, I'm ruining my life, she said, her voice hollow. That I'm embarrassing him, that everyone's going to think I'm pathetic, chasing after someone young enough to be… She stopped, pressing her hands to her face. Claire, he's not wrong, is he? This whole thing is crazy. You should be with someone your own age. Someone who doesn't have all this baggage. Someone who… Stop. She looked up. I don't care what Tyler thinks, I said, stepping closer. And I don't care what anyone thinks. I care about you. That's it. That's the only thing that matters to me. Owen, he's my son. I can't just… I know. But you're not his property. You're allowed to have a life. You're allowed to want things. She sank onto the couch, her head in her hands. What if he never speaks to me again? Then he's an idiot. But I don't think that'll happen. How do you know? Because he loves you. He's angry, but he loves you. And eventually, when he stops being scared, he'll come around. She looked at me, tears streaming down her face. You sound so sure. I am. Because if I had a mother who fought this hard for her own happiness, I'd respect the hell out of her. And eventually, Tyler will too. November bled into December. Tyler didn't call. Claire tried to reach him twice, leaving voicemails that went unanswered, sending texts that were read but ignored. She stopped sleeping well. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and find her sitting by the window, staring out at the dark, her arms wrapped around her knees. Tell me something good, she said one night, her voice small. I thought about it. My boss told me I could work remotely full-time, permanently, as long as I'm available for meetings and hit my deadlines. He doesn't care where I am. She turned, her eyes wide. Really? Yeah. I told him I wanted to stay here, on the island. Owen, you can't give up your life for me. I'm not giving it up. I'm choosing a different one. One where I don't wake up dreading the day. One where I actually feel something. She stared at me for a long time. Then she said, quietly, I love you. It was the first time either of us had said it. The words hung in the air, fragile and true and terrifying. I love you too, I said. Tyler called in early January. It was a Sunday morning, cold and bright, and Claire almost didn't answer. She stared at the phone for 3 rings, her hand shaking, and then she picked up. Mom, he said. His voice was tight but not cold, tentative. Can we talk? Of course. They talked for over an hour. I stayed in the cottage, giving them space. But I watched through the window as Claire paced back and forth on her porch, one hand pressed to her forehead, nodding and wiping her eyes. When she finally came to find me, her face was flushed but lighter than I'd seen it in weeks. He's been seeing a therapist, she said, sitting down beside me. His girlfriend Emma, I haven't met her yet, she convinced him after he came back from here. He said he's been thinking about his dad, about how he treated me after the divorce, how he blamed me for everything when really, he was just angry and didn't know where to put it. That's huge. He said he doesn't want to do the same thing again. He doesn't want to lose me because he's too proud to admit he was wrong. Did he apologize? Sort of. He said he's working on it, and he wants to meet you. Properly. Not like last time. Are you ready for that? She nodded. Are you? Yeah, I am. Tyler flew out in late February. This time, he called 2 days ahead. I'll be there Friday afternoon. I'm staying at a hotel in town. His tone was careful, almost formal. I made myself scarce for the first evening, went for a long run, grabbed dinner at the diner. But the next day, Claire texted me. Lunch tomorrow at the house. Tyler's idea. He wants to talk. We met at noon. Tyler arrived first, pulling up in a rental sedan, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of the suit I'd seen him in before. He shook my hand, stiff but not hostile, and we sat on Claire's porch with sandwiches and coffee. The conversation was awkward at first, full of safe topics. Work, the island, the weather. But halfway through the meal, Tyler set down his sandwich and looked at me. I owe you an apology, he said. You don't. Yeah, I do. I was out of line last time. I said things I shouldn't have. You were protecting your mom. I was being a dick. He glanced at Claire, then back at me. My therapist keeps pointing that out, and it's hard to hear, but she's right. Claire reached across the table and squeezed his hand. You're here now. He nodded, his jaw tight. Then, to me, look, I'm not saying this is easy for me. I'm not going to pretend I'm thrilled about the age gap or whatever, but if my mom's happy, and if you're treating her right, then, yeah, that's what matters. So, just, He paused, searching for words. Just don't screw it up. I'll do my best. He almost smiled. Good. That's all I ask. After lunch, Tyler pulled me aside while Claire was inside making tea. We stood at the edge of the garden, the wind cold off the water. She seems different, he said. Lighter. I haven't seen her like this in years. She's incredible. I know. He shoved his hands in his pockets. For what it's worth, I think she was lonely for a long time. My dad, he wasn't good to her. Not abusive. Just absent. Checked out. I didn't see it when I was younger, but I see it now. He looked at me. So yeah, if you make her happy, I'm not going to stand in the way. Thanks. That means a lot. To both of us. Yeah. Well, he cleared his throat, uncomfortable with the sincerity. Just keep making her happy. All right? I will. It's been 6 months now. Tyler texts Claire every week, sometimes just a meme, sometimes a real conversation, which is more than he did before. He came back in April with his girlfriend Emma, and we all had dinner together. It was good. Not perfect, but good. A few of Claire's neighbors know about us. There was some initial gossip at the co-op, a raised eyebrow at the farmer's market, a comment from the woman who runs the bookstore about that young man staying at Claire's place. But Lopez is small, and people have their own lives. The curiosity faded after a few weeks. Now we're just part of the landscape. Claire still worries sometimes. She'll catch herself spiraling. What if people think I'm ridiculous? What if this is just a phase for you? And I'll stop her and say, let them think what they want. This is real. She's learning to believe it. So am I. Last week, Claire got a contract to redesign the community garden, a big project, the kind that'll take her through the summer. Tyler sent her a congratulations text with 3 emojis, a plant, a heart, and a champagne bottle more than he's ever used in his life. And I realized, we're not perfect. Tyler's acceptance is still fragile. The age gap will always be there, a fact some people won't let us forget. Claire's business is still rebuilding. I still have moments where I wake up at 3 in the morning and wonder what the hell I'm doing with my life. But we're building something real, one day at a time. One conversation, one meal, one quiet morning in the garden at a time. The cottage is officially off Airbnb now. Claire took down the listing in March. I've moved most of my stuff into the main house, though I still go back to the cottage sometimes when I need to think or work without distraction. Claire jokes that I booked her Airbnb for 3 days and never left. She's not wrong. Sometimes, late at night, when we're lying in bed and the house is quiet except for the wind in the trees, she'll turn to me and say, "Do you ever regret it? Staying?" And I'll say, "Not once." Because the truth is, I didn't come to Lopez Island to find someone. I came to figure out what I was looking for. Turns out, it was a woman with dirt under her nails, a garden that refuses to quit, a smile that makes me want to stay, and a heart brave enough to let me in. I'm still here, and I'm not going anywhere.